Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're embarking on a journey that intertwines faith, philosophy, and cosmic cycles Christian epistemology through the ages of Pisces and Aquarius.
Quite a title.
It is. And for those of you who regularly wrestle with theological concepts, the idea of examining them through the lens of astrological ages might initially sound, well, unexpected.
A bit out there, perhaps.
Maybe. But our sources propose a truly fascinating symbolic framework here, a way to understand these profound shifts in how we know. We're diving into a stack of compelling excerpts that explore how Christians have understood truth and God. And crucially, how that understanding seems to align remarkably with these vast overarching astrological eras.
Yeah, the parallels are quite striking when you lay them out.
So our mission today isn't about, endorsing astrology as some kind of predictive science. Not at all.
Right. That's important to state up front.
It's more about using it as a powerful analytical tool, like a historical and philosophical lens, maybe, to illuminate the evolution of consciousness itself.
Exactly. It's about discovering how deeply intertwined human ways of knowing are with these broader cultural, maybe even cosmic currents.
What's truly insightful here, I think, is that we're looking at a synthesis. You've got theological thought on one hand, and this ancient symbolic system on the other. It's almost like a grand meta-narrative unfolding.
It is. And this framework, it allows us to identify what we might call epistemic moods. These overarching intellectual, even spiritual climates.
Epistemic moods, I like that phrase.
Yeah, and these moods have fundamentally shaped humanity's approach to ultimate questions throughout history.
Yeah.
It really offers a unique perspective on how our collective understanding evolves.
Okay, so let's unpack the core concept first. Christian epistemology. What exactly is that?
Right.
It's the very framework for how Christians have sought, justified, understood truth, God, salvation.
All of it.
It's far more nuanced than simply believing on blind faith, isn't it? Our sources make that pretty clear.
Oh, absolutely. Precisely. Our sources really drill down on a few key pathways. It goes way beyond just abstract knowledge or, passive acceptance.
Right.
Foremost among them is revelation. This is completely foundational, and it unfolds in basically two forms.
Two forms.
Yeah. You have special revelation, that's the direct, specific stuff. Communications from God found in Scripture, the person of Christ, the prophets, the teaching authority of the church, that kind of thing.
The big hitters, so to speak.
Exactly. But then there's general revelation, and this is where even nature, our own conscience, human reason, they're all seen as witnesses to God's existence and character.
Like Romans 1.2 suggests.
Precisely. The idea is that the divine presence is subtly woven into the very fabric of creation itself.
That distinction is helpful. But playing devil's advocate for a second, how does general revelation, say, looking at a beautiful sunset, really differentiate itself from just appreciating nature? What makes it specifically a witness to God?
That's a fair question, a really important challenge, actually. The sources suggest it's not just the observation itself, but the interpretation.
Okay.
An interpretation informed by, let's say, a predisposition to see beyond the surface. For Christian epistemologists, that sunset isn't just beautiful in an aesthetic sense. Its order, its grandeur, its sheer existence points towards a creator. It becomes a sign, a clue, rather than direct instruction. But it does require a mind that's open to the possibility of a transcendent source behind the natural world.
So it requires a certain lens to begin with.
In a way, yes. Building on that, we have the crucial interplay of faith and reason. This is huge. Thinkers like Augustine grappled deeply with this.
Right. Faith-seeking understanding.
Fides quaerens intellectum.
Yeah.
Exactly. And this wasn't just a clever phrase, it was, revolutionary. It suggested that belief isn't meant to be blind. It's an active, rational quest to deepen one's grasp of spiritual truths. Then Aquinas came along later and built on this. He distinguished truths accessible to reason alone.
Like proving God's existence philosophically.
Yes, using arguments like the cosmological argument, but then there are truths that require revelation, like the doctrine of the Trinity. Reason gets you part way, but not all the way.
Got it. Now, moving beyond doctrines and logic, the sources also highlight mystical and experiential knowledge. This is where it gets really interesting for me.
Yes.
Figures like Julian of Norwich or Meister Eckhart, how did they know God? What was their pathway? It seems different from scripture or philosophy.
It absolutely was in many ways. For them, it was often about a profound, transformative union with God, something that transcended purely intellectual understanding.
Like a direct feeling or experience.
Exactly, a deeply lived interior experience, a direct encounter that could change their very being, sometimes described as ineffable beyond words.
Wow.
And this leads us to another vital aspect, which is the communal dimension. The church isn't just seen as a collection of individuals seeking personal truth in isolation.
Right. It's a body.
It's a body that preserves, interprets, and transmits this knowledge, whether scriptural, rational, or experiential, across generations. So knowing isn't purely individualistic, it's deeply embedded in a shared tradition and community.
Okay, that makes sense. And what's the ultimate purpose behind all this?
Right.
The why of this intricate quest for understanding in Christian thought?
The sources highlight a teleological aim. There's a purpose-driven goal.
Okay.
The ultimate goal isn't just mere intellectual mastery. It's not about collecting facts about God like stamps.
Right.
Instead, it's salvation and ultimately union with God. This whole journey culminates in what's called the beatific vision.
Which is?
It's described in 1 Corinthians 13:12, where faith basically transforms into sight, direct knowing. It's about spiritual transformation and relationship, not just gathering information.
Transformation, not just information. I like that. Okay, now for the really fascinating connection. Our sources argue that the age of Pisces,
Which is a long one.
a very long one, roughly 100 BCE to 2160 CE, give or take. So basically the entire span of Christianity's existence so far.
Pretty much, yeah.
This age resonates strongly with these Christian ways of knowing we've just discussed. But what's the link? How does a water sign, often associated with intuition, the subconscious?
Emotion, fluidity.
Exactly. How does that connect with deep theological thought?
It's all about symbolism and archetypes. These powerful, universal patterns that carry deep meaning across cultures throughout history. Pisces, as a water sign, symbolizes depth, intuition, a dissolving of boundaries, transcendence.
Okay.
And the deepest insight here, I think, is how Christianity, even with its seemingly concrete doctrines, found its most powerful expression during an age that archetypally celebrated the unknowable, the unfathomable.
Ah, so it wasn't about perfectly defining God.
Less about definition, more about experiencing the vastness of the divine mystery. That's a truly Piscean approach to truth, right? It allowed faith to stretch beyond purely empirical limits, beyond what reason alone could grasp.
That's a crucial point. And the idea of sacrifice and salvation, that's absolutely central to Christianity. How does that fit the Piscean archetype?
Oh, it maps out quite directly. Christ's passion, his suffering and death, is seen as embodying that Piscean self-sacrifice.
Leading to transcendence?
Exactly, leading to spiritual transcendence and new life. It's the central narrative. To truly know God through the cross, through an act of ultimate giving and redemption. And this ties beautifully into the idea of profound spiritual transformation through suffering and empathy, core Piscean traits.
The sources also mention universality and mission and interior and contemplative knowledge. How does Pisces connect there?
Well, think about Pisces and its boundary-dissolving nature. That aligns almost perfectly with Christianity's historical spread across vastly diverse cultures.
Ah, claiming a universal truth.
A universal truth and a mission for all humanity, regardless of background, location. It transcends tribal or national boundaries in its ideal form.
Right.
And then the interior spiritual orientation of Pisces, that's beautifully reflected in Christian monasticism, its long tradition of mysticism, and even in sacramental theology, which focuses so much on inner spiritual realities and the unseen grace.
Okay, so we've established these deep roots of Christian knowing in the Piscean age. Now let's kind of fast forward through history a bit. How did this cosmic mirror actually play out? What did this Piscean archetype look like in action over the centuries?
Yeah, the sources give us a fantastic timeline, really illustrating the dominant epistemic moods of each era. So in the early church, say from about 100 to 500 CE.
The formative period.
Exactly. The emphasis was heavily on faith, on the profound mystery of the divine, on the sacrifice of martyrdom, which was very real for many, and on establishing core creeds, defining the basics of that faith. Think of the courage of those early Christians facing persecution, their unwavering faith in a transcendent truth, often lived out in secret communities. That's a powerful embodiment of Piscean mystery and sacrifice. And as the early church matured, its intellectual heirs, figures like Aquinas and Anselm during medieval scholasticism, they continued this Piscean quest. But now with this profound drive to synthesize faith with rigorous reason,
Building those intellectual cathedrals you mentioned.
that's a good way to put it, mapping out divine truths. Then the Reformation in the 1500s shifts the focus somewhat. To Scripture alone, sola scriptura, to individual conscience, inner piety.
A more direct personal relationship.
Very much so.
Right.
A strong reflection of spiritual interiority, that turning inward for truth, which is still very Piscean in its focus on the inner life.
But then comes the Enlightenment and modernity. Suddenly, there's this huge rise in rationalism, empirical science, even the beginnings of secular critique. That sounds like a direct challenge to the Piscean vibe of mystery and faith.
It absolutely was a challenge.
It sounds like a constant dance, a push and pull. But some might argue that the Piscean vibe doesn't just wane or get replaced entirely. Maybe it suddenly transforms and integrates into the new age. Do the sources address that kind of nuance?
That's a sharp observation, and yes, they do. The sources actually highlight both dynamics. While the Enlightenment certainly brought a dissolving of old certainties, a definite movement away from pure mystery towards empirical verification.
Right, demanding proof.
Demanding proof. Yet the Romantic era and then the 20th century brought a kind of return to experience, to existential faith. Think of figures like Kierkegaard. This wasn't necessarily a rejection of reason, but maybe a reassertion of subjective truth, that deeper, perhaps irrational longing for unity. It demonstrates that the mystical Piscean undercurrent persisted even if it was transformed.
So it adapted.
It adapted. It's a beautiful example of how these archetypal energies don't just vanish. They morph. They find new expressions.
It really paints such a vivid picture of how our quest for truth isn't static, is it? It evolves.
Constant.
So as Pisces wanes, its mystical interior orientation starts to give way to something new, something potentially fundamentally different. Which brings us to the horizon. If the age of Pisces is winding down, maybe around 2160 CE, what comes next? What is the age of Aquarius, and how might it further transform how we know, both religiously and, well, broadly?
Right. Aquarius. Archetypally, it's symbolized by quite different things. Reason, technology, egalitarian networks, humanistic knowledge, science, a burgeoning global consciousness.
So it's very different from Pisces.
Very different energy. Less watery depth and mystery, more airy intellect and connection. It shifts towards collective, intellectual, and technologically mediated forms of understanding.
Okay, so we're talking about a significant, maybe even fundamental shift in epistemology itself. Not just uncovering new facts, but entirely new ways of knowing and validating truth.
Absolutely. I think the shift is potentially quite profound. From perhaps a primary reliance on faith and mystery towards empirical systems, the ever-expanding role of artificial intelligence, cutting-edge science like quantum physics or neuroscience,
and things like open information networks.
Exactly. Networks that democratize knowledge. We're already seeing the early signs of this in our current technological revolution, aren't we? Where verifiable data is often prioritized and knowledge is increasingly accessed collectively rather than solely through singular established authorities.
We definitely are. So how does religion, specifically Christianity, adapt to this new Aquarian paradigm? Does it just get left behind as irrelevant? Or does it transform in ways that might surprise us?
Well, the sources suggest adaptation and transformation, not necessarily extinction. They point out that Christianity is already producing things like a robust theology of science,
Trying to bridge that gap.
trying to explore how cutting-edge discoveries can actually deepen our understanding of creation rather than diminish faith. We also see the rise of things like liberation theology.
Focused on social justice.
Yes, on social justice, collective well-being, which aligns very strongly with Aquarian egalitarianism and humanism, an increasingly active interfaith dialogue that demonstrates a networked understanding, moving beyond traditional, sometimes exclusionary, boundaries.
So engaging with reason, collective responsibility, interconnection.
Precisely. These look like clear signs of adaptation to Aquarian ways of thinking and being, fostering a broader, more interconnected spiritual outlook.
What an incredible journey, seriously. Tracing Christian epistemology, not just through dusty history books, but through these expansive, almost cosmic ages. So wrapping this up, what does this all mean for us right now? As we stand here, seemingly on the cusp of this new era of knowing, what do we take away?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, what emerges is this grand synthesis almost of different modes of knowledge across the ages, each bringing its own distinct epistemic mood. You had the age of Aries before Pisces that brought heroic, law-giving religions. It emphasized outward conquest, divine kingship, knowledge tied to external authority and decisive action.
Very outward focused.
Very. Then Pisces, which is now nearing its close, has been about interior faith, profound mystery, personal salvation, that universal mission transcending borders, knowledge experienced intimately, subjectively, universally.
The inner world.
The inner world, yeah. And now Aquarius seems to promise collective rationality, advanced technology, democratized knowledge, maybe even a kind of post-religious spirituality that prioritizes humanism and global interconnectedness. Knowledge becomes more of a shared, verifiable, maybe technologically augmented endeavor.
Wow. 3 very different flavors of knowing.
Indeed. And this raises, I think, a really important question for your own journey of understanding for everyone listening. As this emerging Aquarian age potentially changes how we access and validate truth, how might it encourage you to reconsider not just what you believe, but the very methods and sources you trust for ultimate understanding? Will your personal quest for knowledge become more collective, maybe more data-driven, or will that Piscean longing for mystery, for direct experience, find completely new forms of expression in an Aquarian world?
That's a fascinating thought to end on. Will we integrate, or will one mode dominate? A lot to ponder as we move forward. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the cosmic currents of knowledge and faith.